everybody, and welcome to a brand new edition of T Watches a Scary Movie. I am T, and we're of course talking scary movies. I appreciate everybody tuning in for another brand new episode. Of course, we have brand new episodes every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and you can get alerts for that when they go up on the YouTube page if you subscribe, to the link right here. Yeah, go ahead and subscribe to that link right there. That'll let you know when we have new episodes going up every Wednesday night. And then, of course, after we finish up with our new episodes, we usually do some kind of watch party with a new movie or a movie I talked about in the episode. And then we're also doing our TV watch parties right now. We've been watching some really good stuff. We've had Dexter, Black Mirror, Hannibal, Spawn, Tales from the Crypt. We got the new season of Creepshow on it. And we're going to be adding in the show Them in just a few weeks once we are finished up with Spawn. So it's going to have another nice new fresh lineup feel to it. But if you want to know about our watch parties, when they're happening and what we're watching and all that kind of stuff, you got to go to the Facebook group page. And if you want to know where that page is, got to just subscribe here. Go to that link, get subscribed. That will have everything you need to know. Also, some great discussions going on in the group as well, too. For example, Scream Factory just announced they're dropping a new special edition Blu-ray of Brotherhood of the Wolf, a movie that I didn't realize so many people love. I love some Brotherhood of the Wolf. I still remember seeing the previews all the time, though the previews definitely played up like the old-timey kung fu that's in it, though, for sure, like Mark Dacascos' character. They played up the hell out of that and didn't really actually focus that much on the monster, which I found to be extremely interesting. But it's a fantastic movie that if you haven't seen it, you are in for a treat because we're absolutely going to be doing a watch party with that at some point coming up. It's such a good movie. And so I'm glad they have a new release coming out. I already own 3 copies of that movie and I still pre-ordered this because I'm like, look, 4th copy's not going to hurt anybody at all, especially if it has a new 4K scan. It's going to look fantastic. So definitely looking forward to that. So what do we have going on tonight? What are we going to talk about here? Work has been absolutely kicking my ass a little bit with the type of stuff I've had to be training over the last few weeks. As y'all know, typically when I'm doing audio podcasts, it's just because I don't have the time to do a video podcast like we are doing here, like I usually have been doing. And I'm gonna get back to it. I promise you, I definitely will. It's just hard to get the time necessary to do that. And I got a lot of weddings coming up, so we're gonna swap back and forth. But I promise we'll be getting back to some video podcasts. But one thing that we have been able to do, though, is that we've been watching the Saw movies. The new movie, Spiral, from the Book of Saw, starring Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson, is set to come out next month, May 17th, I want to say. It might be May 14th. But it's set to come out next month, and it's honestly looking pretty good. It's definitely the most intriguing looking Saw movie that we've had in a long time. Saw kind of lost a lot of its intrigue, honestly. Around like 5, I want to say. And again, I say that knowing that Saw 6 is my absolute favorite in the series, but it'd be hard for me to argue the point that a lot of the intrigue of the series itself went away after around 4 or 5. Folks just didn't care anymore. Like when the new Jigsaw movie came out a few years ago, which I saw. I don't think it's a bad movie in the least bit. I really don't. But the issue, though, with it is just that I didn't care. I didn't care. Saw the final chapter. I did not think was really that good. And so going from that to Jigsaw did not really do anything to catch my interest. But Spiral looks really good, and just off the cast alone, you definitely want to see it. It's Chris Rock in a horror movie, playing a detective. Samuel L. Jackson, I guess, is playing his dad, and it's we've seen Samuel L. Jackson in horror, but the fact that Sam Jackson is doing a Saw movie, it'd be like seeing Sam Jackson do like Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th almost, And I say that, like, we've had a lot of great actors who have done horror before, but there's just something interesting about this pairing of Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson in the 9th installment of the Saw series. I want you to keep that in mind, all right? Yeah, the original film or maybe the first sequel, you know, it's pretty common to see like big name actors do things like that, especially in the old days. But when you're this far in, that's not something that happens. And again, we had 7 Saw films in the main series. Jigsaw made 8. This is going to be number 9. And the 9th film is bringing Chris Rock and Samuel L. Jackson in. And there's something amazing about that. Honestly, I feel like that right there is just going to already help this film so much, getting the credibility it needs, that it's going to be better than the previous installments. And Darren Lynn Bousman is back to direct this film, who did quite a lot for this series. Basically, while Lee Whannell and James Wan were the Godfathers, they made the original Saw, and they carried that, through like the first couple of sequels. Basically, after Saw 2 came out, the series became Darren Lynn Bousman's baby. And he's back here to direct it. Oren Coles and Mark Berg, producers from the previous installments, they're back to produce it as well, too. Josh Stolberg, who wrote this one. The interesting thing is that the only other Saw film he's worked on is Jigsaw. And depending on your like of that, that's either good or bad. It definitely tells you that it's going to be connected, obviously, to the previous installment somehow, because same writer, so obviously they're not rebooting it or anything like that. But I'm very interested to see where we're going with this film. We don't know a lot about it yet, and the previews so far haven't played up anything in regards to traps, Jigsaw himself, or anything like that. Keep in mind, Jigsaw has been dead since Saw 3. No spoilers, obviously. I mean, that's nothing new. But Jigsaw has absolutely been dead since Saw 3. And every film after that, any appearance has been in like a prequel capacity, showing like, oh, this happened back in the day with Jigsaw and stuff. And it's a very convoluted series. Like, don't get me wrong, there's some good stuff in the Saw series for sure, but it's convoluted as fuck. And I've told everybody who's been tuning in, we've watched Saw 1, 2, and 3 so far. I've told them, like, look, Saw 1 is probably the least important to the entire series. There's a callback to it in Saw 7, which at the time was going to be the last in the series itself, so it has a really big callback to the original Saw. But past that, like, you actually don't need to see the first Saw movie to get everything else that goes on in that series. Saw 1's actually kind of unimportant to the lore, because the idea that there's some asshole out there who sets people up in traps that either they succeed and they go through an immense amount of pain and this makes them learn a life lesson, or they end up dead. You know, we don't need like Saw 1 to explain it, because they do explain that literally in every single film. And I ain't joking about that, y'all. Watch every single Saw film as we're doing. Every movie, they have to let you know, well, this is what he does. This is how he operates. He doesn't kill his victims. It gets fucking annoying, because it's like, look, you're insulting the audience that if I'm seeing Saw 5, look, man, I've watched the other ones. I'm not coming into this shit blind. You don't need to tell me the rules again. If you just came in, that's your fucking fault. You have 5 movies to understand the way Jigsaw is doing shit. It's just funny. It's just funny to me. But Spiral truly does look good. If the emphasis is not so much on Jigsaw, who again I remind you is dead, unless we're getting another prequel, because some of these films have taken place in the past. But Jigsaw is dead, so I'd be okay with Tobin Bell not showing up, honestly. But that does leave the question of who the killer honestly is going to be. The chances of it actually being Jigsaw would be slim to none, in my personal opinion. It wouldn't make sense, and if they did go the prequel route, that wouldn't make me happy. That would not make me happy to see that. But we'll see. We'll see who the killer ends up being, honestly. A lot of signs, a lot of predictions out right now is that obviously Samuel L. Jackson's going to get killed, which makes sense. Like, I feel like, look, when you put Samuel L. Jackson in genre films, he's there to serve a purpose. You put him in a movie about genetically enhanced sharks, he's going to get eaten by the damn shark. If you put him in a movie to fight a giant gorilla, or giant ape, whatever you're going to call it there, obviously that giant ape or gorilla is going to kill him, all right? If you put him on a plane with snakes, he's going to actually fight these damn snakes, all right? I mean, it just makes sense that if he's going to be in this film, if anybody out of this main cast is ending up in a trap, it's going to be his ass. And if anybody's dying from a trap in it, it's going to be his ass. So I'm excited to see how Samuel L. Jackson goes out in this movie, because he's absolutely going to be in a trap. But we don't know who the killer is going to be. Usually it's got to be somebody in the main cast. Like, you don't really use a bit player in movies like these unless there's a plan for another one, which we should mention there are already plans for Saw 10. And it makes sense. Look, I mean, I'm not a big fan of certain horror series that have just a large amount of sequels. I'm looking at you, Paranormal Activity, you blow. But you can't deny the fact that one thing that doesn't exist in theaters that much these days is a horror franchise. You know, we might get one or two, but if we're talking on the levels of Jason, of Freddy, of Michael Myers, things like that, unless you're one of those, we're not getting sequels like that coming out. And needless to say, Saw has been kind of one of the only constant franchises in the horror genre of the last 20 years. And whether you like these films or not, that has to be appreciated, because if Saw doesn't exist, then things like Paranormal Activity doesn't exist as well, okay? Like, we don't get filmmakers taking chances on low-budget horror films, because keep in mind, the original Saw was shot for cheap. It was shot for incredibly cheap. And it's when you started getting the franchise involved that's when it started being, you know, more money going into the budget and everything. Okay, so I don't know. I mean, there's so much good for this series. Honestly, I'm interested in this fresh take they have going. The fact that, again, Saw debuted in 2004. It is 2021. It is almost 20 years later, and we are just now getting to a 9th installment somehow is incredible. It's incredible. And we're going to talk about Spiral next month after it comes out. But tonight I thought it'd be fun to talk about the first 3 Saw movies that we've watched in our watch parties, because we've had some fun with that the last few weeks, getting in Saw 1, 2, and 3. A lot of these films, for some of you, you said this is the first time you've seen them. Some of you still refuse to watch it because, you know, it's torture porn, and I get that completely. Some of y'all, like me, haven't seen them in a while. These are not films I really revisit. I will say, when it originally came out, Saw 2 I did watch quite regularly, because before Saw 6 came out, 2 was absolutely my favorite film. Thought it was fantastic. I watched it on a weekly basis, which meant something had to be wrong with me. But that's kind of the trick with horror. The more you watch something that really freaks you out, that makes you feel gross and everything, you can desensitize yourself to it. You know, not great, and we're not judging my folks, because I did a lot of this without them knowing, but I watched a lot of horror movies growing up, and we're talking shit, you know, kids absolutely in no way, shape, or form should be seeing. They should be watching, but, you know, I was going to make it happen whether they liked it or not, honestly, and I did. I watched everything, and not a lot really affected me. Like, I remember, off the top of my head, one of the only things why I was a kid that I watched that kind of got to me was in Tales from the Crypt, Bordello of Blood. Chris Sarandon's character, him and Dennis Miller make a what do you call it, a coup, an attack? I don't know. They basically go to attack the nest of vampires at the brothel, and when Chris Sarandon's character, Father, God, I can't remember his last name, but anyway, his character goes to fight Lilith. And he goes to stab her with a stake. She grabs his hand and breaks his wrist. And that's one of the only things I remember being grossed out as a kid. Other than that, shit didn't really do it to me for the longest time. And then what happened was I started getting older. And things started fucking with my head more in regards to torture porn. Because I never minded Hostel. I didn't think Hostel was a good movie, honestly. Like, it's interesting, but it's never been one of my favorites. But Hostel didn't do to me what it did to a lot of other people. You know, when we start talking about eyeballs getting burnt and Achilles being cut and stuff like that. Like, it's brutal for sure. But it didn't really affect me that much, honestly. But as I got older, torture porn has absolutely not sat well with me anymore. For example, when we watched Saw 2 the other night, and the character, I think her name is Madison. It's the one played by Emmanuelle Vaugier. I think that's how you pronounce her name. The woman from Smallville. She plays the drug addict and the prostitute in the film. and her trap, she goes, there's a antidote in the box, and there's two holes that she reaches her hands up to get the antidote, but the holes have razor blades attached to them, and now you can't get them out because they basically curve in. And that trap didn't do anything to me when I originally saw the film and subsequent watches, but good lord, these days, nah, son, I'm not about that at all. So that's one of the hardest parts about this series, is that there are installments of it that I do enjoy, but god damn, it's a chore to get through traps and stuff like that these days. I don't know. But I was reminded with Saw 1. I saw Saw 1. Me and my boy Carlos saw that a while ago. We didn't see it in theaters. We definitely caught it on DVD. I think I purchased it without watching it at all. And we're hanging out with some friends at the time. They're like, okay, we got to bring a horror movie. That's the way we got to go. And we put it on. I was like, damn, okay. Because if you remember the trailer for the original Saw, they put a lot of focus on Adam's line of, they want us to cut through our bone, or they want us to cut through our legs, or whatever. And they don't show the leg itself, but they do have a shot in there. It was a very spoilery trailer that shows Cary Elwes like starting to cut, basically. And I think one of the attractions to the movie wasn't the traps, actually, because keep in mind, the whole way that traps are presented in the series following the first Saw, like from Saw 2 and on, is completely different from the way they're presented in the original film. The original film, they do have some of the traps in there, like Amanda is in the reverse bear trap. And then they have the one with the guy who's covered in like gasoline or whatever, and he has to find the combination to open the door and get out, and he's stepping on glass. The guy that has to crawl through the cage. There's a bunch of traps in there, but they're really not the focus, because number one, they're not actually that gory in the original film or anything like that. And Jigsaw himself still plays a very active role in the film. So there's a big plot about the police trying to catch him and him killing a police officer and everything too. So the first film is so different tonally compared to the other films. And I don't know whether that's good or bad, because I do appreciate the fact that Saw is a really, really good movie. But if I had to think back of memorable horror films for me, ones that actually just stick in my mind, I don't know if Saw is actually in there at this point anymore. Seeing Dr. Lawrence Gordon, played by Cary Elwes, cut his leg off is still going to be iconic every single time you watch it. But then I think the issue is that Saw 1 is the one that's most affected by the rest of these sequels. Like, it has so much stuff that ends up being referenced and like, oh, this is not actually the way it happened, and things like that in it, to where it is really, really hard to actually enjoy the way that it feels these days to watch that movie. I don't know. I'm curious to see what y'all think about it. It's not the twist, but I am curious for those of y'all who have seen Saw 1. Put in the comments here. Tell me how you feel, 16 years later, 17 years later, watching the original Saw. Does it still hold that importance to you? Do you still find it as enjoyable? Let me know. Put it in the comments section. Now, Saw 2. Saw 2, I should have, one last point about Saw 1 is that it still has the most unfair trap in the entire series. Think about it. Jigsaw set his traps up to where everybody learns a lesson, but they do have a chance to get out of it. They have every chance to go ahead and do that. But after that, though, like whether it's Jigsaw like in Saw 2, and then he's getting help from Amanda, but then he's also getting help from and I forget the cop's name. I actually have to look that up because I don't remember who Costas Mandylor ended up playing in that, and that's gonna bug the hell out of me. But what I'm curious about though is is like God, now I've lost my point. The traps. Yeah, so the idea here with the traps, Hoffman is the guy's name. But following the original Saw, it's not really like the focus then becomes on the traps. The first movie, the focus wasn't on there. It was on Jigsaw himself and then our two characters, Adam and Dr. Gordon, who are locked up. But Saw 2 and on is really focused on the traps. They're the highlight pieces. There's always the very big and gruesome one, and then a bunch of other like smaller ones in each subsequent film. And Yeah, they're harder to watch now, but that was always the enjoyment of it. Kind of like, again, I don't enjoy the Paranormal Activity series, but you always wanted to watch it to see how they were going to eventually reveal the demon and what the ending of the film was going to be. We don't really care that much about the ending of the film except for what the twist turns out to be with the Saw film. But Saw 2, though, I was stoked to see it because the idea of the traps being what was focused on and Jigsaw playing more of an active role was always a super cool idea. I mean, I don't have another horror film to really compare it to off the top of my head because Friday the 13th wouldn't really even be a correct parallel unless the idea is your idea of the Friday the 13th series is it's Jason. It's always been Jason. So then somebody shows you the first film, is like, yeah, but before Jason, it was Pamela. And I guess that is a good medium to use because, you know, if you've never seen the Saw films, you might have been told they're all about the traps, the gruesome traps that people get into and how the hell are they going to get out of them without hurting themselves, things like that. But then it's like, okay, the first film isn't really like that, but every other one is. And Saw 2 starts introducing the background, the Bible, basically, of this series that's going to carry forward in each film because now it becomes important to know certain points of each Saw movie as you go forward to understand what's going to happen in the next one. So Saw 2, we get set up there to where we have what's his name? Oh Lord. Oh God. Yeah. Matthews, Detective Matthews. Yeah, Donnie Wahlberg joins the cast as Detective Matthews. Basically, one of our protagonists in the film itself. He's the one who's now going to be facing off with Jigsaw. But then in another area, we have the game that has a bunch of people trapped in a house that is filled with traps. So it's the Saw house, basically. And you have Amanda, played by Shawnee Smith, coming back, now playing a bigger role. From in her first one, she was one of the people in the traps, but there was no other importance coming out of it except that she was grateful to have been in it. And we're going to play that up very big in Saw 2. Just right off the gate, Amanda is the accomplice. Amanda is Jigsaw Jr. She is the one that's basically controlling a good chunk of this game because, as we learn, you know, Jigsaw does have cancer. He is dying. He's a frail old man. He can't do all of this by himself. So this film also introduces the fact that Jigsaw has an apprentice who's helping him put this all together. And some of the traps in here are really good. I mentioned the trap before with the girl who gets her arms caught by the razor blades. That's a really good one. One of the initial traps there where a guy's looking through a peephole in a door. Key gets turned and gets shot in the face. That's a pretty fun one as well too. And then there's a pit of needles that's a gross one now. But the story is actually what's really good about this film. I mean, the first film, it's not that it didn't have a bad story. The first film is really, really good, but I didn't find the story all that captivating. You know, a doctor's in this trap because he didn't pay enough attention and he's cheating on his wife. And then Adam's only in there because he's a private investigator and taking photos. Like, it calls back again to Adam's treatment in this series being completely shitty. But in this one, we get this idea of, all right, well, there's a not completely good or bad cop out there that maybe uses some not too legal methods to conduct his cases and everything. And this is now catching back up to him because all these people that are in Jigsaw's traps are people that he's put away illegally, not through very okay means at all before, basically. And what's happening now is like, in addition to all those people being in this trap house, so is his son, who he's not on the best terms with. I call it a trap house. I know what a trap house is, but this is a trap house in a very different meaning at that point. And the goal here is that you have to start paying more attention to what you're being told because there's clues in everything Jigsaw says. For example, Jigsaw tells Detective Matthews, if you want to see your son alive again, all you have to do is sit here and talk with me and then he'll be revealed. And due to his frustration, his impatience, it basically starts a chain of events that's going to lead to his death later down the line. But we get some great interaction in the house itself. Dina Meyer shows up in a supporting role for the police, and she'll take on a more important role moving forward as well, too. As well, we have minor characters being set up for importance in this as well, which is really one of the great things they did in this series is that they do set up the idea of all these minor characters in a previous film suddenly being more important in the next film. And I like that a lot because that means we don't have to cast all these big name actors. You know, it's just, hey, this new person's going to have more importance the next one that we do. And another background character is Officer Rigg, played by Lyric Bent, who again will also play a more important role later on in this series. So there's a lot of things they're setting up in this film for their universe, and I think that's one of the reasons why I like Saw 2 so much, because there are a lot of callbacks to this film moving forward in the series as a whole. The movie, of course, ends on the reveal that Amanda is the Jigsaw apprentice. And that being a pretty big thing, because again, how could Jigsaw be doing all of this? And there was a pretty good reveal, honestly, just because the idea that somebody who went through one of these traps would now help put other people in it is pretty extreme, but it worked so well. It was a great twist to have in this film, honestly. And this was my favorite of the Saw series for the longest time. Saw 3, though. Saw 3 was the first one I got a chance to see in theaters. I didn't see Saw 1 or 2 in theaters at all. And out of the remainder of the series, I actually didn't see that many more of them in theaters either. Like, I did a marathon with my friend Will where we watched Saws 1 through 5. So technically you could say saw them all. But realistically, Saw 3, Saw 5, and Saw 6. I saw Saw 7 as well too. So I didn't see 1, I didn't see 2, I didn't see 4, and I didn't see Jigsaw in theaters. All right, so it's half and half. All right, we can deal with that. But Saw 3 I saw in theaters, was a big deal at that point because it was supposed to be the final installment. They were gonna leave it on a cliffhanger, and that was gonna be it for the series. But it was also supposed to be the goriest one out there. All these interviews were talking about it. It was gonna be this big thing, and I was pretty stoked for it. I was pretty stoked for this thing, honestly. Leigh Whannell came back to write the script. James Wan worked on the story, and this would pretty much be the last time that these guys were really involved outside of acting for Leigh Whannell. But damn it, if it didn't look good. And went and saw it, and yeah, the traps in this are extreme, including the worst one, the rack, where a man has all his limbs in mechanical devices that eventually twist all of them in ways they are not supposed to twist. So the traps design was excellent in Saw 3. The story here kind of goes back to Saw 1, though, in a way, to where Saw 2, again, these characters, at least at that time from what we knew, didn't have much involved with Jigsaw. We can't give credit at this point because we didn't know at the fact that a lot of these characters had other involvement with Jigsaw. But in Saw 3, we get a kind of a self-contained story to where our lead characters here, one of them, we don't know what the involvement is with Jigsaw. It's basically an idea of, oh, this dad has been chosen because he's living a very bitter life after the death of his kid. And then this woman has been kidnapped to take care of Jigsaw due to some indiscretion she's currently having. And so we have a game that's running with, I believe his name is Jeff Denlin, I want to say is his name, working his way through this factory, trying to assist all these people that are stuck in these various traps. Whereas we have Lynn on the other side, who has been forced by Amanda to try to save Jigsaw, who, is still experiencing issues with cancer and brain tumors and stuff like that. And we get this awesome scene to where she has to actually operate on him there in this factory. She can't take him to the hospital, and cuts his head open and uses a drill and a fucking not a chainsaw, it's like a circular saw, though, to remove a piece of his skull. It's awesome, and as much as I don't like gore, that scene is dope. So dope. But also one of the better twists as well too, where we find out Lynn and Jeff are actually married, and this game was to get them to pay more attention to what they do have, including another child who's out there as well. And man, that was a good twist, as simple as it might seem. Really good twist to be followed up with an awesome killing of Jigsaw, because Jigsaw, or Saw, Tobin Bell, he dies. John Kramer dies in Saw 3. Everything after Saw 3, he is dead. They're flashbacks, with the exception of Jigsaw, because that's a prequel. We'll talk about that later. But like the idea that he's dead now, he's killed brutally. So is Lynn in an awful twist. So is Amanda. Everybody is dead except Jeff at the end of this movie. And they leave it on a cliffhanger of his daughter having to be saved because she's stuck somewhere else. So good. Such a good film, honestly. I don't know why I didn't enjoy it more than Saw 3, but I think I just like the fact of having multiple protagonists that Saw 2 had in there. We're rooting for certain people to survive. But man, like the first three Saw movies are really, really good, honestly. They have a lot going for them. And it's interesting to see that quality kind of go back and forth with the next three Saw movies, Saw 4, 5, and 6. But we're going to actually be watching Saw 4 in our watch party tonight. You guys don't have to worry about getting that added on with our TV watch party that we're going to be doing. We're going to watch that tonight. So get to the Facebook page. You can get the link, and that'll let you know how to tune in here to watch Saw 4 with us. That's going to do it for us, though, folks. I want to hear your thoughts on Saw. Was there a trap that you don't like watching? You know, did you go see any of these in theaters? Let me know in the comment section. I'm excited to talk some more Saw with you, though. So, I appreciate everybody tuning in. You know who this is. My name is T. We've been talking scary movies. Y'all stay scared.